I think the media should be free and the media shouldn't be interfered with. People in this country are losing faith in the judicial system. And one reason they are losing faith is because of the delays. And we need to seriously look at this and seriously address it. I gave a challenge before the 16th of November to the candidate Gotabaya Rajapaksa and also to Mahinda Rajapaksa, saying that come out publicly and say you will not sign the MCC agreement. The two of them didn't do it then, and then they haven't done it still.
Welcome everyone, you're watching another episode of Conversations. Elections are around the corner. Politicians have presented their policies and plans, and it's time for the public to decide and vote and help shape the future of the country. On today's episode, I have with me the former Minister of Finance, Eran Wickramaratne. Thank you so much. I know you're very busy these days. Thank you for taking the time off and having this conversation. So to start things off, I would ask you a very straightforward question. Elections are coming up. What results are you anticipating?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm the former State Minister of Finance. Yes. Yes, it's a question about results. Generally, people tend to expect an answer like, you get so many seats in Parliament, this is what's going to happen and all that. Generally, after a presidential election, things weigh in the direction of the elected president. But it's been 8 months since the presidential election, and many things have happened, many things have changed, right? And therefore, we expect to perform extremely strongly in this one. But I would like to also focus not on the issue of just the quantity, but also the quality of the election results. This is very critical on the quality of an election result, not just the quantity. That you have the right people in Parliament. It really, really matters in the end. Because today, they have created a thing saying that you have 225 people who are unworthy to be in Parliament and so forth. I can tell you replacing this 225 with another 225 itself won't help. And the other thing is, it's a myth that all 225 are corrupt or uneducated or something like that. There are certainly bad elements. So the quality is important in whom you actually select out of your preferences. For example, people are supposed to declare the assets and liabilities. Very few people declare the assets and liabilities. And even once you're elected, you declare assets and liabilities, you give it to the Speaker of the House. If you're a minister, you give it to the President of the country. That's very unsatisfactory. Because if you give it to the President of the country and you have something to hide, he hides it on behalf of you, which are declaring to civil society, he has a hold on you. So I think law must change. Everybody should declare it and give it to the Speaker of the House. It should be available to civil society. The other thing is, 1 year you declare assets and liabilities and you declare the next year. If there's a difference, particularly if it has increased or something, then another law needs to be strengthened. That's the Anti-Bribery Commission law, allowing them to actually pursue you and get explanations, or if you don't have proper explanations, to legally pursue you. That's not there. The third reason I would say is, in an election time like this, you receive donations in an election and you spend those donations. Those never enter your assets and liability statements anyway. Donors also don't obviously like to be identified. For good reason. But if we have laws, election laws on donations and expenditures, like countries with good governance have, then that will also change it, you see. I would advocate that we need to bring laws. I'm making all these arguments to show your question, what will the results be? There's a quantitative element to it and there is a qualitative element to it. Then at election time, if you take expenditures, your main expenditures will be, apart from donors' expenditures, will be on media. It will be on television, you see, for example. And on television, if you take primetime news on one of the leading channels, right, it will go from 450,000 approximately to 1.45 million rupees. It goes up nearly 3 times. If you take and try to get your 30-second, ad thrown in on like a very popular drama or something like, it'll go again 3 times, maybe from about 350,000, 3 times to maybe just under a million or something like that. So that itself breeds corruption, because then when people want to get elected, they have to spend a lot of money they don't have. When they get elected, they have to go and then basically pay back favors to those who have donated to them. So the system itself is a problem. So if you're tackling the problem of quality of people who are going into parliament, there are several aspects that need to be tackled, including the availability of media at reasonable prices. Government should step in basically to create that environment.
Like you mentioned, if one wants to get into politics, you have to have the ability to throw a lot of money in. How should this system be changed?
I would say there is no one answer. One is the electoral system itself could be changed. We have a PR system based on districts and based on the national election result. One debate that has been going on in Parliament, because before this system came in, we had an electoral system, which is a smaller geography. The candidates have a smaller number of people to go and meet and basically to get their message across. They could do it on foot, you see, and your costs immediately come down. But the PR system has its strengths as well, because it gives you a better representation of the population in Parliament. So some countries have evolved a system, and the most talked about one is the German system, where you have a mix of proportional representation and a parliamentary system like the Westminster system. Doing that, so if you do that, that will probably take care of both objectives. It will drastically bring down the cost, because there will be a majority of them competing based on a smaller electoral area. So that's one way that it could be addressed. The other way it could be addressed is, if we are a democracy, and one of the features of a democracy is that everything can't be determined by money and wealth that people have. It is disgusting to see that people, going at election time and buying votes. They go and buy networks of people who are working out there by giving them money. That's disgusting. It's disgusting for the reason that somebody who has no access to those resources, by their ability, by their merit, they can't get to the top of that election. Some of them can't even think about competing in a parliamentary election. So they get stuck in the municipal council, maybe the provincial council, but they can't come much further up. So to do that, one way is, because we're a democracy and we need to create a more equal chance, is that the state should intervene. And I would say this particularly on media, right? I don't believe in controlling the media. I think the media should be self-controlled. There should be guidelines for the media. Ethics need to be practiced in the media. And if these things are being broken, right, then there needs to be independent organizations, like we have lots of independent commissions, right, who have powers to deal with it. But otherwise, I think the media should be free and the media shouldn't be interfered with. Having said that, to make the election more affordable, maybe the government should intervene, right? Now, normally you have, let's say, a rate card in a normal time. Then at election time, the rate card goes up, as we mentioned, maybe 3 times up. So whatever is reasonable, right? I'm all for private sector business, private sector freedom and all that. So whatever is reasonable. And then the government steps in by providing a subsidy which is equal to all political parties and all candidates. Mm-hmm. Then a person who doesn't have the wealth, doesn't have the requisite income, but who has the ability, who has the experience, could also come into the political process. That will make a huge difference in Sri Lanka's politics.
And thereby paving the way for many more to actually enter politics.
Many more, and also paving the way for younger people to come, right? I am told that I am the second CEO of a public quoted company in the Sri Lankan parliament, right? And then I came in when I was like 50 plus, you see, years, and I was able to save over a period of time. But you need, right, professional profiles coming in much earlier, maybe at 35 years, they should be coming into parliament. But if you're 35, and I would say typically if you are married and you have 2 kids, you have to save for their education, you can't think about coming because you haven't still made the savings, because you have to first invest in your kids and then you have to invest in society, the responsibility in politics. So they can't even think about coming. So they are very disadvantaged, and young people are very disadvantaged, right? So we need to really look at changing the system. So if we have to create a meritocracy, right, income is one area, right, and therefore government has to step in terms of laws, practices, and in terms of subsidies. And also a meritocracy must bring in more women into politics. In our cultural context, women often play a supportive role. They don't really get financially compensated, but they do an awful lot of work. I know that through my own personal experience at home. My wife is extremely busy, does a lot of work, but gets very little financial compensation for whatever she does. But then, if you are really going to change the face of Sri Lankan politics, more women need to come into politics as well. And therefore, I would say, if democracy and meritocracy are the principles, then we need to change it for the better.
There's a lot of public concern about the fact that many politicians and political parties promise to bring justice to cases of public concern. However, something that is quite evident is that these cases drag on for years, and they say justice delayed is justice denied. How do you think this system should be changed, and who should take the responsibility in changing the system?
I think you have raised a very important question. And often when we raise questions, we tend to think that politicians are the ones who are responsible for changing that. And when it comes to the judicial system, politicians, certainly we have a role to play, but politicians alone can't change it. And in fact, I would be concerned if politicians interfere with the judicial system, even for a good reason. I will be concerned. So in modern political theory, good governance is defined as, there are 3 pillars of government. You have the executive, which is the president and the cabinet. You have the legislature. The legislature is the parliament, and then you have the judiciary. These 3 arms of government, one must be independent from the other. So the judiciary is critical, and it must be independent of the executive, the president, government, and the cabinet, right? And it's very, very critical. So when it comes to delays in the law, right, and I must say the past president was concerned about this. He in fact called a meeting. I happened to be the acting Minister of Finance at that point when he called the meeting. He invited me into the meeting, and he was going through this, the delay in the judicial process in cases. Some cases go on for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. At that time, I remember there were about 750,000 cases outstanding. The number may have gone up, I'm not sure what the exact number presently. And this is in a population of just 21 million people, right? So what you said about, justice delayed is justice denied. So when we went through that process, there are things that the government could do. For example, lack of resources, attracting the right people. Maybe the remuneration is not right. That's where government comes in. More people need to be recruited, maybe to the Attorney General's Department, Solicitor General, and related institutions to the bench and so forth. Government can again provide resources for it. Then the issue came up about, physical infrastructure, buildings, for example. And of course, being the acting Minister of Finance at that point, I came up with a practical solution and said, I think we have limited resources in this country. The resources, as far as we can, we should put it behind people. So whether it's judges should be well compensated. Judges should be well compensated for the reason that then they will be independent. They don't get tempted, or they don't have to fall prey to people who might basically try to bribe them. So judges should be very well compensated. Then the AG's department should attract the right people, more people. They should be compensated well, because the comparison there is going to be with the private bar. So they should be compensated well. Those are responsibilities that government should take. When it came to buildings and infrastructure, I told them, if you have limited resources, we'll put it on the people. When it comes to buildings, I said that's secondary. For example, it's a little bit like the school. In school, you go in at 7:30, by 1:30, classes are over, school buildings are empty for the rest of the day, right? And the building is not being used. Investments made, no return. Courthouses are just like that. There are lots of courthouses in this country. We must certainly invest in improving the infrastructure of the courthouse, right? To make it modern, make it comfortable, and so forth, right? But the courthouse is used like a school for a few hours, right? And maybe we should be innovative. We should look at ways of having in one day 2 judicial sittings, because when I went to school at one point, I remember I went to school in the afternoon. The usual class is in the morning, 7:30 to 1:30. I think I went to school at 1:30 and then I finished at 5 or 5:30 or something like that. I remember this when I was very young. But the same building was used, same classroom was used, but 2 classes were held. So there are innovative ways of doing it. That's where government comes in. But where the people in the judiciary and the legal profession come in is, right, this is a reflection of their willingness and ability to change the system. They have to basically set their own benchmarks, right? And they have to say, we are going to take those outstanding cases, we are going to halve it. We are going to take the time, right? There are times that can be worked for different categories of cases, and we are going to come with innovative ways of halving it. I am not suggesting compromising good judicial decisions. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I am suggesting changing practices, right, so that the delays will be reduced. And that must come from those in the legal profession rather than from us, because if it comes from politicians, then it will be construed to be an interference in the process. But the reason I'm putting that responsibility there is people in this country are losing faith in the judicial system. And one reason they are losing faith is because of the delays. And we need to seriously look at this and seriously address it.
And I'd also like to get your views on the MCC agreement. Prior to the elections in 2019 November, the opposition then actually had a lot to say about the MCC agreement, but there are allegations that after the elections in August that they might sign the MCC agreement. What is your opinion on this?
There are lots of stories about the MCC agreement. During the election, what did they do? They took the MCC agreement and they went around the country saying this is an agreement to basically divide the country, sell the country to foreigners and so forth. We have heard this discourse for too long in this country, right? And this discourse is fundamentally based on untruth. I remember seeing on television a map of the country being drawn and then a corridor being drawn across, you saw that, Alanki, as well, across the map. And then saying that, if you have to go for religious purposes, even to a place like Anuradhapura, right, you will have to apply for a visa from the American embassy to go to Anuradhapura. It's unfortunate that there are people in this country who actually believe this kind of nonsense, right, and absolute untruths. There's absolutely no such thing, and these are used for political gain. Absolutely fictitious stories. The MCC agreement, right, at the time it was being negotiated, was on the website of the Ministry of Finance for anybody to look at the MCC agreement. Like in any agreement, right, when you go to the bank, you want to borrow money, there's an agreement between you and the bank. In any agreement, right, there are pros and cons. There are factors that will weigh in favor of the lender and factors that will weigh in favor of the borrower. Any international agreement is the same, and therefore we need to scrutinize every agreement to see that as a whole it benefits the citizens of this country.
Absolutely.
Right? And governments have to work from that point of view. This MCC agreement, the Millennium Challenge Cooperation Agreement, right, was basically started in the year 2000 or thereabouts. And they were giving this as a grant around the world. The Sri Lankan government of that time, Mr. Eran Wickramaratne was Prime Minister, was interested in getting that grant. So they started a conversation with the MCC on getting this grant. But Mr. Ranil Wickramasinghe's government changed in 2004. Subsequently, we had a new president, Mahinda Rajapaksa. The new president's foreign minister was the Honorable Mangala Samaravira. Mr. Rajapaksa sends Mr. Samaravira to the US to go and talk to the MCC to see if they could actually get the MCC grant. In recent weeks, you have seen WikiLeaks actually release a statement saying that the former president Mahinda Rajapaksa, they don't say former president, President Mahinda Rajapaksa, and his government was very keen on obtaining the grant from the MCC, right? Now, these are the actual facts. I challenge anybody, if what I'm saying is untrue, really to prove that it's untrue, right? These are the actual facts. So then after that, it was turned down because Sri Lanka was going through a turbulent time with the conflict in this country. Then when a new government is elected in 2015, in 2016, again, our government initiates and says, why don't we try to get this grant? It's $480 million, right? And $350 million of the 480 is basically for the traffic and for the transport system in this country. In urban areas, the traffic congestion, all the junctions, I can't remember the exact number, like 280 junctions, were going to be improved, expanded, electronically managed. The bus system, right, common transport, public transport was being improved, right? So that if you have to go to a bus stand after the interview with me and you have to go to a particular destination, you will look in your app what time the next bus comes, you will know how many minutes you have to walk to the place, you will decide whether you're taking the first bus or the second bus. Then the security in the transport system improves, particularly relevant for women, because if you are traveling at night and you're traveling on your own, your security is of paramount importance. This system created a situation where women will feel secure traveling even in the night, a very secure system. Out of the $480 million, $350 million was being spent on that. A balance 60 odd million was being sent in basically creating electronic databases for land. I own my house. I have a deed. That deed is basically some paper. It's written on paper. We often hear the cases that horopu, that people have got false deeds written. Because these are physical documents. You pay a government official somewhere and they connive with you and people have owned it. Even politicians are being accused of creating false transactions, right, in this country. What does electronics do? Electronic data reduces the possibility of fraudulent transactions. It also, the advantage to government in actually implementing it is, today if I were to ask any president, any prime minister, any land minister, even today, if I were to ask, what are the lands that we own in a district? What are the lands we have leased out? What are the lands that somebody is illegally occupying? No president, no prime minister, no land minister knows that information. These are state lands owned by the people. Putting this on an electronic media, right, would have given us a sense of what we own. If it is Alanki, yours and my private property, we know exactly what we own. If we have leased a place, rented a place, we will know exactly. What. If we have a dispute, maybe even a family dispute on a distribution of a land, we will know the facts. Government in this country is the largest owner of land. People in this country are dispossessed of land. Very few of us have freehold land. The vast majority in this country don't own it. They are living on permits that have been given by government. If this country is to move forward, if we are to move from being a middle-income country to a high-income country, asset ownership is the secret. But to do asset ownership, you have to create the systems. Part of this MCC grant, I think it was about $67 million, was going to create that. So what do? Right? Politicians connive sometimes with public officials who don't want transparent systems put in place. Why don't they want it? Because if you put transparent systems in place, their opportunity to get bribes and to do unauthorized transactions is very big. But if you put it, then that won't be there. The balance 60 odd million on the MCC was for technical purposes and technical expenditures and expert expenditures and so forth. So that was what it was about. And the other thing I would like to say about the MCC agreement is, unlike other agreements, right, governments have, once they are elected, they can sign agreements with other countries and the agreements have to be implemented. In the MCC agreement has to be approved by the parliament of that country. So in Sri Lanka, right, only the cabinet had approved it. Subsequently, it has to be brought to parliament. It could be debated. Public opinion could be sought, basically. Civil society opinion, because the documents are available. And in parliament, a debate could be there. And after the debate, if you need to basically further negotiate it, you had the opportunity. Or parliament could reject the agreement and the agreement won't be carried forward. So what did these people do? Right? They created a story and they created a prejudice and they are deprived Sri Lanka of the $480 million, right? Because they want to win an election. I gave a challenge before the 16th of November to the candidate Gotabaya Rajapaksa and also to Mahinda Rajapaksa, saying that come out publicly and say you will not sign the MCC agreement. The two of them didn't do it then, and then they haven't done it still. You see, this is unfortunate that in this country, that even the media has played up to promoting falsehood because of political agendas. It's very unfortunate, and they haven't really acted in the interest of the country. That is why I said, while there has to be media freedom, there has to be media ethics as well.
Thank you so much for shedding light on the MCC agreement, because there are so many doubts revolving around it. Coming to the final question, I would like to know, the world is facing a pandemic and Sri Lanka is affected by it as well. Do you think it's appropriate to hold elections at a time like this?
The question was first raised in January by the leader of the opposition, Sajith Premadasa, in Parliament. It didn't receive any attention that this pandemic could affect Sri Lanka. At the end of March, the president created the lockdown. There was a delay of about 2 months in doing it. And then we turned a health problem into an economic problem. My position right at the beginning was, right, that Parliament had a 5-year mandate. The president was using his powers to dissolve it after 4.5 years, and it was constitutionally he could do it. But given that we had a pandemic and we want to remove uncertainty, right, I argued at that point that the president should allow Parliament to complete its full 5 years. We, as a responsible opposition, would have provided the president the support needed in dealing with the pandemic. And if he had let Parliament go till August, then the elections would have come up in November. But there would have been a certainty in it, and the government could have fully concentrated on it. What happened is the president didn't do that. They have always been in a hurry to hold an election. The health of the public hasn't been their highest priority. Holding the election has been their highest priority. And we have got into this mess now where people are asking the question, including yourself, Alanki, that should we be holding this election under these circumstances? We have no option now, right? Because election has been announced, campaign is going on. But the question I have is this: after the election, right, if the deaths in this country goes up, who is responsible for it? Is it President Gotabaya Rajapaksa? Is it Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa? Who is responsible for it? I would like to know who is responsible.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having this discussion with you. I do believe it was a constructive and insightful conversation. Thank you for watching. I will be back with another episode soon. Until then, stay safe and take care.